Welcome to the Sens Spotlight podcast brought to you by the Sick Podcast Network. Before we get started, we are going to shout out our special sponsor. Go all the way with Betway and get a free bet up to $200 if your first bet loses. Scan the QR code on the screen or click on the link in the details section to create an account and redeem your welcome offer. Offer is only available for new customers. Terms and conditions apply. Offer available in Ontario. Must be 18 plus. Please play responsibly. We also, for our YouTube fans, please like and subscribe, but also hit the hype button. That helps out the show. And yeah, that's all we have today. The season's approaching. Sens start tomorrow. So we brought on John Matisz from The Score to have a little bit of a season preview. And he has some Sens insights to share. So I think a lot of people will enjoy it. And yeah, hit it, Shane.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to the Sick Podcast. Sens Spotlight.
Here's Alfredson, bursts the speed, gets a shot away, score! Daniel Alfredson ends the game in overtime and sends the Ottawa Senators to the Stanley Cup Final for the first time in franchise history.
The sickest Ottawa Senators podcast. It's gonna be sick.
And we are joined by The Score's John Matisz. Thanks so much for taking the time and doing this. How excited are you just for hockey to be back and to finally not have to watch preseason games and finally it matters?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that last part because I don't know about you, Alex. Like I'm a jaded, 15-year vet in the business. Like preseason is just so not my jam. And that sounds like it's coming from a privileged place, and I guess it is. But like, I think even fans are like, what is this? Like, it's nice to see the odd prospect, but no one really cares. And I find hockey such a weird sport where like the players have to care for it to be entertaining. Whereas like baseball, just as an example, like spring training, everyone's pumped to see that top prospect face a major league pitcher, right? And, major league pitchers aren't going to like slow down because it's the spring training, right? So anyways, yeah, happy that the season is here. Got off to an interesting start last night, and Sens tomorrow. Sens Lightning.
Exactly. Yeah, the one little thing I would say is I am happy that it's 84 games next year and only 4 preseason games. I like 4 is enough. That's enough to get back into game shape without maybe getting injured, and also just watching AHLers play against each other in an NHL game. But to the Sens, of course, they start tomorrow. I guess just from your vantage point, like you're not here in Ottawa covering the team day to day, like what do you see the expectations as, and how good do you think this team should be heading into the 25-26 season?
I mean, I think that they're a playoff team again. I think the Eastern Conference is super interesting as far as how's this all going to shake out, because for years we've been talking about these Atlantic teams that are rebuilding. Well, all of them are kind of ready to fully blossom, for lack of a better way to put it, where you've now got a real log jam in the middle of that division, or arguably towards the top. But I see the Atlantic kind of shaken out in this way, where it's Tampa at the top, Toronto second. Then actually I project that Ottawa will be third. And a lot of that is based on bumping Florida down after the Barkov and Tkachuk injuries, and just sort of being a team that can cruise through the regular season, get in as a wild card team and get to work. So that's why Ottawa ends up in that spot. But I think that they're a step ahead of Montreal, Detroit, Buffalo, and I think Boston could end up last in the division this year. It's just kind of the way things are shaken out. And like what sort of gives me confidence in Ottawa in that sense of sort of slotting them ahead of a Florida or Montreal is, you remember that Pierre Dorion quote? Like, obviously, remember it's
There's so many.
Yeah. I guess, I need to specify here, but the one where he paused on, I believe it was Sportsnet, and paused and said, "We're a team." That was his answer to what we should be excited about. It's funny to think about that quote in the context of like the 2025-26 Sens, because I feel like you can say that about the team now, but like in a complimentary way, where it's like they are like a fully built team, whereas what Dorian was saying was literally like, I don't know what else to say, but like, we have hockey players. That's basically what he was saying there. We have a team to put on the ice. Now we have a playoff team to put on the ice, and one that's been sort of like, I would say, well thought out. Like I see Steve Staios and Kent Hughes in Montreal, like kind of going about their jobs very similarly, where the
Mhm.
long term is very much on the top of mind, but also they're filling in the gaps in the present in a very sort of like responsible way. Um, so yeah, like I look at Ottawa, I see a balanced roster. I see a really promising trio in Tkachuk, Stützle, and Sanderson. And by promising, I mean they've already arrived. It's not like
Sure.
they're young and up and coming, but like in terms of their ceiling as a trio, and then obviously the goaltending is league average at worst, I'd say. A detailed coach in Travis Green, like you go up and down the list, and I just feel like there's a lot there. There's a lot of credibility around the Senators being a playoff team again.
No, it's interesting just on the "we're a team" quote. I feel like I've heard that just from fans and media like a lot recently, which I think is almost a byproduct of how far this team has come, right? Where
Mm.
it does feel like a team. And I think what's interesting just going into this season is that they are really deep, right? I think in the Atlantic, and you had Tampa, Toronto, Ottawa. I think the advantage that this team has is they might not have the star power outside of the big three that you kind of mentioned, but up and down the lineup, you have Pinto on your third line, Ridley Gregg, Shabbat's on your second pairing, Tyler Cleven's playing well. Like the goaltending seems solidified, and we might ask you about Allmark a little bit later. But I think in the game of hockey with a condensed schedule, there's going to be more injuries. Probably, Ottawa's really in a good position to kind of offset those kind of possibilities. Where in a regular season, guys go down here and there, and I think Ottawa will be okay compared to Toronto, Tampa, Florida, maybe Florida to a lesser extent in a sense because they already have some injuries. But that if Matthews goes down, how are they going to do, right? If Tim Souza goes down, okay, that's not good, but you have Pinto and Cousins as your 1 and 2. Like that's a pretty good fail safe. So I think Ottawa's in a really good position, and I guess just with what you said about Staios, he was talking to us today, and he said there's only 8 players on this team now that were on the team when he took charge.
Hmm.
How much have you? How much credit does he deserve for righting the ship from a team that was we're a team to we're an actual team?
I like that. We're like starting a new slogan or something here. Yeah, I mean he deserves a ton of credit, but I think we can't, for as much as people like to slag on Pierre Dorion, like we can't forget that he filled this team with some like real
Oh,
foundational pieces. And correct me if I'm wrong, but he was the GM in 2020 when they had that fantastic draft, correct? Like I don't want
yes.
to yeah, okay.
Yep.
So like that alone, it's like we can't give Staios 100% of the sort of credit pie here. But I've really liked what he's done. Uh, he hasn't been a perfect GM at the same time. Like I would have liked him to go out and find maybe a more reliable finisher somewhere in that top 9 to fill it. Like I like the Zetterberg acquisition last year, but like that feels more like a shot in the dark and not a bad shot in
Mhm.
the dark. I think of all players compared to like I don't know, like a Arthur Kaliev or something. Um,
Sure.
that's a more reliable shot in the dark, and I like that trade. I wasn't at the time. I was like, what is San Jose doing here? So that's always good if you're on the other end of that. But nevertheless, like I aside from like nitpicking the sort of finishing ability throughout the lineup for a team that finished second last in 5-5 goals, aside from that, which is somewhat significant, I have liked what Staios has done, and especially the blue line. Like I think it's already one of the better blue lines in the league as far as again, speaking to your word, I think you used it, balance. Like I think that there's a ton of balance on the back end, let alone the rest of the roster. And I love the way that the different skill sets fit together with Sanderson and Zub and Shabbat and Jensen. Like that is just solid every day of the week in terms of that top 4. And then you've got so many options for that third pair with Montempalo, obviously Clevin when he's healthy. Spence has this dynamic quality, and we'll see what he turns into ultimately as a full-time NHLer. Sabrango, Yakimchuk in the AHL. Like the fact that they're so well positioned with that top 4 and then have a million options, like it's kind of something
Mhm.
that's forgotten about, I feel like, at this time of year, because it's October, but when we get into the playoff races and the playoffs approach, like if you look back through history, like NHL teams that go on deep runs, like they go through at least 7 defensemen, usually 8, sometimes 9. In terms of like, you don't want your third pair to be an AHL caliber player, or someone on the third pair, I should say, an AHL caliber player when you're in, say, the third round. Like that's just, you probably won't get to the third round realistically. You can only drive that top 4 into the ground to some extent. Like you can't just completely ignore that third pair. So that's a long way of saying I really like the way that Staios has thought about his blue line and executed in terms of, like, say, the Spence trade, or just even drafting Yakimchuk, where it's like that seemed like a stretch to some people, but he's developed quite well here in terms of shoring up the defensive game with, the way that he approaches gap control, his stick work, and just getting him in more of a two-way mindset. So that's what comes to mind immediately in terms of Staios and what he's done. But even up front, Matisz, good pickup. Obviously, the Cousins trade looks pretty genius right now, and that's not to sort of harp on Norris, especially with the injuries he's had. But like at the time of that trade, I was thinking this is a win for Ottawa. So yeah, Staios has his fingerprints all over this.
Is that just on the Norris trade? Is that because of Norris's injury history that you just feel like it's safer to have a guy like Cousins who has really never dealt with any major injuries?
Yeah, and I just think that Buffalo was selling low, and Ottawa came kind of swooped in, and they know Norris better than any organization, and for them to sort of give up on him speaks volumes to some extent. Again, like the injury history is what it is. Like the guy is, last year when he got to Buffalo, he was dealing with something else. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. And also, I'm sort of going back in time trying to rack my brain here without doing a Google search, but if I remember correctly, like Cousins is a year younger, and like his cap number is
7. He's making
less.
7, and Norris is like almost at 8, basically 8.
And so, like, over the long term, is that like a big deal? No, but it's also like it's part of the evaluation where you go, okay, let's just say hypothetically we think these players are of equal value on the ice. Well, okay, lower cap number, younger age, that makes a difference.
Yeah, and I think the difference between the two players, like Norris is very much a straight line. He's a really good defensive player, but likes to doesn't really drive play. And Cousins is maybe more iffy. Like I don't know if we know that Dylan Cousins can drive play, but he has more of that skill set where he's really a great skater, great on the puck, has really good hands, right? Maybe not as good defensively as Norris. So they're different players, and it's just interesting that they made that trade at that time, and it seems to work out. I don't know if this team, if Dylan Cousins is going to be Ottawa's second line center for the next however many years left on his contract. I still think that's a bit, we're going to kind of remain to be seen on that front. But I think what they wanted was stability and knowing that the guy can play day in and day out. You get a second round pick, you flip it for Zetterlund. Like it made a lot of sense at the time. And it's interesting. Like I do think Zetterlund, just within the organization, I still think people are wait and see about this guy. There's a lot of guys that I've heard, and I don't know if you've heard similar things, that will tell you, oh, he's a 20 goal guy, he's great, or he's like, don't touch him. Like he shouldn't have got 4 million or 4.2, whatever, 7.5. Right. So I think he has a big prove it year for the Senators. Where is he that top 6 guy? I think he's a 20 goal scorer, but I don't know if he's leading the charge on your first line. I don't know if he's that caliber of player, and I guess we'll find out. But I think Ottawa, as you said, has a lot of different. Staios brought in a lot of guys that complement each other.
Yes,
especially on the blue line, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for transforming the team. But I guess for you, how do you think he can take this team to the next level?
Well, I mean, it's unfortunate that because of the Dadonov saga with what happened there, they don't have their first in 2026. Because I mean, the Senators just seem so primed for some sort of mid-season trade. I mean, they could obviously use prospects in the 2027 first. Like, it's not like this restricts them completely, but like,
sure, but it's a hindrance.
Yeah, like it's sort of one of those things where you look at their assets and go, oh, there's probably some teams out there that are going to prefer a draft pick sooner than 2027, even though 26 is a good draft. But nevertheless, yeah, I think they're set up here well going into the season. And you mentioned Zetterlund, like, and the opportunity is going to get. I mean, you never want to see anyone hurt, but like Batherson out, you're sort of forced to have Zetterlund in a high leverage situation to start the season, and that'll give you hopefully some sort of resolution or some sort of like actual takeaway on like what this guy can contribute to the team. So he has that runway there. Like if you're Zetterlund, like you got to be looking at the start of the season as like not career defining, that's too dramatic, but
But
sort of like maybe tenure defining for Ottawa and what he is capable of and where he's going to fit into the big picture here. So I find that pretty interesting, but yeah, like just to circle back, like I don't like, I love the sort of two-way ability of a lot of their players, you know, whether it's Eller or Amadio or Giroux or Pinto or Greg, like love that. And I think it's important for a playoff team, but I'm still looking at that forward group going, where's that sort of one shot shooter? And it could be Zetterlund, but like that's kind of best case scenario. Is there a player out there somewhere? No one's coming to mind immediately right now because we're not quite in that sort of like rumor mill season. And I haven't wrapped my head around sort of like the potential rentals this season because I've been so focused on other things. But to me, they just seem so primed to like add some kind of like just shoot first top 6 guy or at least top 9 where you're just adding a little more finish and maybe like someone to help on PP2 because otherwise the forward group has a pretty like actually a very high floor. I would say it's just what's that ceiling, because you know Stützle's going to produce, Tkachuk's going to do what he always does, and you hope he can take that next step in terms of turning expected goals into real goals. Perron, you assume like his career, Perron's really interesting in terms of like his career, and like he always puts up roughly 50 to 60 points. Like, can he continue to do that as he sort of inches closer to like the sort of the back half, or not the back half, he's in his back half, but towards the end of his career. And then you've got like Sanderson in terms of like, can he, from a facilitating perspective, can he do what he did last year? Does he level up on last year from that perspective, or is that too much to ask, especially as he becomes further entrenched as the guy on the back end? So I would say there's more like offensive questions about this team than anything else.
Yeah, no, I think you hit it on the nail that this team defensively, the ceiling, and I think as the forward group, as you said, they're going to be good, but how good can they be? Probably not as good as some of the other best teams in the Atlantic, like Toronto, Tampa Bay, Florida. I don't think they have that firepower, right?
Yeah.
But are they going to be just sustainably good throughout a season? I think that's a pretty, like if you're putting a wager on it, like I think you feel pretty comfortable with that. And I think the interesting thing, you mentioned Sanderson, and he's just unbelievable. What a player.
Mm-hmm.
But in preseason, I asked Travis Green about this. In the last game of the preseason, he was flying up. Like I've watched him for the past couple of years. I've never seen him pinch up into the play more than he did. And he set up Pinto for a beautiful goal early against Montreal on Saturday. And I think he is really going to try to become one of those guys on the back end that is in that 60, 70, 80, like he got 57 last year. Like he's not that far off. And he had a terrible start to the season. The last 30 some games, he was third in the league in terms of points by defenseman, right? So if he can keep that up and take a little bit of a step too, I think that's where their offense comes from more so, is if Sanderson takes a leap, if Spence can produce a little bit. Like last year, they're playing Travis Hamonic like all these minutes, and it's just like, you're not going to score when he's on the ice. No offense to him, but he just doesn't create any chances. So I think that's where they get the offense, but I don't know if they're going to score that much at 5-on-5. I don't think they'll be second last, but they're probably going to be more in the teens if I had to guess, because all their shooting percentages would tell you that they got Corsi, but like the wrong way, right? They should have, they should have been kind of middle of the pack offensively. But I guess kind of for you, like we were talking off air, you spoke with Linus Ullmark. I've obviously spoken to him a couple times here in Ottawa at the media event to begin the preseason, the players tour. Just maybe talk about that experience and what he kind of said to you and just being around him.
Yeah, sure. Like obviously your listeners are going to know, what he brings to the table on the ice and probably a good feel for his personality. But Yeah, so I was at the Player Media Tour in Las Vegas, which is basically like a preseason event where a bunch of stars, like basically one player per team, flies in and they do a bunch of different stations. Like a lot of the social media content where guys are letting down their hair that you see, it's probably from that. So anyways, he entered my room, which was with a handful of other national reporters, and very personable. Like he's kind of this interesting mix of like, he has that weird goalie part to him, but is also like very down to earth and approachable. So he's in the middle of like a weird goalie who's like completely in his head, whatever, just thinks about things completely differently than everyone else, and hence why he's stopping pucks for a living. And then there's sort of like the normal side where I think that Allmark's got like a real sort of like leadership quality to him, which a lot of these goalies who are labeled weird do not. So anyways, actually it was Matt Larkin of Daily Faceoff. He asked him about basically this middle ground that Allmark seems to occupy as a goalie. And I just thought it was an interesting sort of revelatory answer that he gave in terms of like how he sort of tries to act within the team environment. And he didn't quite say it, but I think it was implied that like over time he's learned to act this way, learned to be himself more, whereas maybe earlier in his career he was not that guy. So, I mean, I'll just read, a quick quote here. He said, "I
Sure.
always try to stay open. Some days I have a shitty day and I might be grumpier or more sad, whatever it may be. We all have those days. And if I can show those emotions, not just the good ones, then it becomes more genuine. People will hopefully feel more safe and secure in talking to me about different things. I can give my 2 cents and it actually makes a difference. I want to be a teammate you can go to at any point in the day. You can always call, can always visit. The door's open, that sort of teammate. That just comes from life in general. Could it be my upbringing? I think so, but it's something I've worked on and have gotten help from my wife on to become a more open-minded person in both good times and bad." And he sort of said this within the context of like learning how to be a leader now that he's been in Ottawa. Like, previously he didn't have to be vocal. He didn't have to sort of pull a guy aside and say something if they were not up to the team's standards, because he was sort of just blending in Boston, I should say, like a team that had a real like well-known legitimate leaders in Chara and Bergeron and Marchand and whatnot. But let's face it, like in Ottawa, not that there's like a leadership void by any means, but like it's a team that, whether it's Tkachuk or Stützle, like the real difference makers on the ice are on the younger side. So he's clearly taken some kind of leadership role in that room, and that's rare for a goalie, if we're being honest. Like, and it's funny, right? Like he kind of what he was trying to say there is that like he's not afraid to give tough love, and that sometimes like maybe a teammate might not like that because he is sort of like just being himself, which is more talkative or more straightforward, and some people don't like when a teammate's like that. But he said, his biggest takeaway over the years in terms of leadership is like to be your more genuine self is better than to sort of like hide in the background and like just sort of like be in your own head, because I think it helps Allmark play better. And I think he feels like the room operates better if everyone's being themselves. And even if it rubs a teammate the wrong way every time or every other time, the next day they can shake hands and move on. So anyways, I don't know if that's super interesting to people, but
just being around him in practice, like he's always fooling around with Alfie all the time in practice, shooting pucks to each other. He loves to take slap shots. Even in the room, like he'll go up to guys. Like he's definitely like a vocal guy. Like he isn't quiet. And I've been around goaltenders, and I wouldn't say they're a bit more sheepish, a bit more meek. Like they're just not big personalities. They don't come into a room and kind of hold it. And Allmark's the opposite. He will come into a room and that he's there for better or for worse. And he's done a lot of charitable events. Like Sens fans probably remember a couple of weeks ago when a child with cancer came in, and he has commemorative pads for the kid, and he went to see him and gave him a big hug, and he spoke just really raw and emotionally about how much it's touched him being around kids who are struggling with cancer and thinking of his own kids. So I always think about him just being around him the past year or so. he's a bit of a philosopher. Like he's a bit he'll tell you how he sees the world, not just about hockey, about kind of everything from, childhood cancer to uh his goaltending save percentage, right? Like it kind of masks a wide range of things. And I think, you know, as a media person, and you can relate, you love that, right?
Mm-hmm.
That he's not going to have short sound bites. He's going to show you who he is. And I think as a whole, not just in Ottawa, but in the NHL, we need more personalities. So I like that he's able to be himself, and it's interesting just to see how he's become more comfortable. And the other thing, and I don't know if this is normal, but after games, he and Justin Peters, the goalie coach, will like go over everything, and they'll get into it. Like nothing more than a work discussion, and I'm not saying anything crazy. I haven't seen anything dramatic, but you can tell they'll be like, okay, on that goal, I was doing this. I felt like I needed to do this. And I've never seen that from a goaltender before post game. And I thought that was a really fascinating thing that I've seen over the past year.
Well, so
around it.
when I was in Ottawa in April, and we met in person, and which was really nice
Mhm.
because you were just sort of a guy I knew on Twitter before.
Yeah.
Same with Julian and Graham and the crew covering the team. When I was around the team, I did notice that after I believe they played the Sens. Yeah, after a Sens
Yeah.
game late in the season, I don't know. It was like Brady Tkachuk was getting scrummed post game, and then you look over and Linus is talking to the goalie coach. And I'm sure other goalies do it behind the scenes. Like I don't think that's probably super rare, but I found it like it was notable in the moment. I'm like, I've
Yeah.
never seen a goalie sit there with the goalie coach right after the game, still in his pads and out in the open. And the out in the open part might be irrelevant, but nevertheless, it was he clearly wants to like review things and then presumably move on from whatever bad goal he let in, or maybe there
Yeah.
was a call he didn't like or whatever. And that's just kind of how he operates. So he seems like a bit of a different cat in terms of like, and not necessarily in a bad way, but just in terms of like, there's sort of like the quiet, weird goalies. Then there's like the maybe like, I don't know, Hendrik Lundqvist, who's like maybe the most, even
Just
though he's like incredibly handsome and amazing at everything, he's still like pretty normal. Like if you meet him, it's like, oh, this is a very
yeah.
normal guy. And
Yeah.
then Linus is somewhere in the middle there from kind of my perspective.
I guess maybe going because you were at the playoff series between Ottawa and Toronto in the first round last year, and I wouldn't have said he had a terrible series, but it wasn't his best performance. The numbers weren't great. If you look, I think he's won 2 out of his last 10 playoff games. Like it's not the greatest
Mm,
record.
no.
And I'm curious for you going into this season where Ottawa is expected to be a playoff team. How much confidence do you have in a guy that's won the Vezina Trophy that he can maybe recapture that in Ottawa?
I don't have like the utmost confidence just in terms of, you laid it out there, the playoff record, and just he didn't stand on his head versus Toronto last year, but there's far worse situations, even among playoff teams, in terms of goaltending. Like, I'll give you an example. Carolina,
Ugh.
they're a cup contender, cup favorite. I have them winning the Eastern Conference this year and then losing to Colorado. Like that's kind of the prediction I threw out there. But Freddie Anderson and Kochetkov, like I don't even trust that they're going to be healthy, let alone standing on their heads, right? So there's teams out there that get by without quality goaltending. It's not ideal. Hence, the Hurricanes, to use them again, like they have not gotten to the Cup final in part because their goaltending hasn't been good enough in the playoffs. So, but that said, like Ullmark is high pedigree in terms of like how he came into the league, winning a Vezina. He looked pretty good in the regular season when he was healthy last year. So there's no reason to like fully doubt him, but the playoff resume is what it is. It's like Connor Hellebuck. Like we can talk till we're red and blue in the face in terms of how phenomenal he is in the regular season, but like there's a big enough sample size in the playoffs that he hasn't come through. And obviously, some of that blame goes towards the Jets. Some of it maybe is like weird noise, but like at the end of the day, he hasn't come through. And Ullmark is certainly not on that level in terms of the playoff failures, but we're still waiting for him to have his sort of shining moment. So I don't know. It's tough, right? Because goaltending is so volatile. Goaltending is so difficult to project. So the fact that the Senators are entering the season with, I would say, definitely a top 15 goalie, maybe a top 10 goalie in the league, that's huge. So you just sort of go from there and hope for the best, really.
No, and I mean, if you looked at their save percentage 2 years ago or 2 seasons ago, they were last or maybe second last, but one of the worst. And last year, I think they were 8th or top 10. They were top 10 for sure. And he had a 9-10 save percentage. Like, he was good. I think in a weird way, he kind of mirrors the team a little bit right now, where he's good but not great.
Sure.
And they need to find a way for either him just to become that 2023 version of himself that won the Vezina Trophy. I am high on Merrilainen, who's the backup this year. They've given him the backup car keys, I guess. And I think he's a really athletic goalie. I'm not saying Ullmark's not, but he's more big, positional. Merrilainen's super athletic, and he just needs to kind of figure everything out, and he's still young. He's only 22, 23. So I do think they have a decent fail-safe in terms of Ullmark if he gets hurt. I'm still surprised that Staios hasn't brought in a third goaltender. I just thought that would have been a guy that can play in the AHL, be a third goaltender, just because of Ullmark's injury history. He's never played more than 49 games, and that's when he won a Vezina. So I think that's a part of the season. Like, I try not to drink the preseason Kool-Aid too much, John.
Sure.
If you have any tips, like, please give them out. But
the
one area where I see where this team could maybe take a step back and miss the playoffs, or maybe kind of be pretty similar, like not take another step forward, is Ullmark gets hurt and you're playing someone, Hunter Shepard, Mad Sogard, 15 games, and you go 5-10, and then you snowball and you either miss the playoffs or you're right on the fringe, right? I still think this team is good as defensively as they've improved. They still need a good goaltender. Like, they can't do Carolina. They can't be that team that just throws someone and knows they'll still win games. I don't think they're at that level yet as a defensive team. So I think that's a storyline to see. And I don't know if he's going to be the right guy in a year or two from now when the team needs to win, because Brady Tkachuk has only 3 years left on his contract. Like, and they've paid him all this money. Like, if I look back at Steve Staios's kind of decisions, the one decision that I feel is the most make or break is Ullmark. Because I think Cousins, Norris, it makes sense. I don't think any of the signings, like Zetterlund, might work out, but you haven't invested like a ton. You traded a second round pick. Like, it's significant, but not world beating. It's a great trade. You got off Korpisalo's money somehow. I don't know why Boston did that, but if he doesn't hit, you've just given this guy $8 million for 4 years and into his mid-30s with injury history.
Yeah, I mean, it's so difficult if you're a GM, because you're always searching. And I mean, remove Staios from the equation. Like, the Senators organization was searching and searching. So he finally finds it, and obviously the stock was pretty high on Ullmark at the time too, right? So you easily convince yourself, we need to lock this guy up, because, like, we're sick of searching. We don't have someone in the pipeline that's immediately going to make a difference. So let's sign this guy up. But yeah, it comes with risk. I mean, all goalie contracts come with risk. Unless, you could maybe take a few names out of that in terms of like Shesterkin and Vasilevsky and Swayman and whatever, like the five big dogs in terms of Hellebuck, in terms of just like, sure, there's some risk, but I don't care. Like, we need to have this guy locked up. Ullmark is like somewhere like in the second or third tier below that. So it's unfortunate in that sense, where like the bet did carry some risk. But yeah, it's difficult, because, you know, if they had gone short term with him or just seen how it went before signing him, are you back to square one? And you look at, like, say, I don't know why, but Seattle's coming to mind in terms of like they had Grubauer, right, where they you know, he had this one-off great season in Colorado. They signed him as a free agent. It's been one of the worst contracts signed in like the salary cap era. Like, I haven't actually looked into the comparables, but like, he's been terrible. But then they find Joey Decord, right? I can't remember how
Ottawa.
Yeah.
from Ottawa in the expansion draft.
Wow. Okay, I didn't even
Yes.
mean to make a
No. And
connection there,
then
but
Philip
you're right.
Gustafson was traded for Cam Talbot. It's been a great run of goaltenders.
I didn't even
Shout out
mean to
Matt
bring up
Murray.
Seattle to bring up old wounds for Sens
That's
fans
okay.
listening. I was literally just thinking about Joey Decord mixed with Grubauer, how one bet poorly and then they've bet on Decord as the future, and it seems like it's going to turn out. And it was at a fairly low number, what, 5 million or something, like that's
Yeah,
going to be
for
nothing.
5, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be nothing in a few years. So that looks like a pretty good bet, especially for a team that's made some poor bets on, Stevenson and, whoever else. Like they've really thrown money at some free agents and kind of haphazardly. So yeah, goaltending, man. It's what is it? Goalies are voodoo. What's the old saying, right?
Yeah, let's go. I think I wrote goalies are voodoo at least like 4 times for Sportsnet last year. A version of I put voodoo. It was somewhere, but I think you're right, and it's not even a criticism of Staios himself. Like at the end of the day, it worked. Like at the very least, they made it to the playoffs. They look poised to. If they make it to the playoffs this year and they don't win a cup in 2-3, or they don't even get close, but just become a playoff team, I still think it's a win.
Yeah.
I think in a sense, my not critique, but my worry is almost the pendulum shift of if they got someone else. I can't even think who was up at the moment, but that could really take them to the top. Like if they had Joey Decord, maybe they would be in a better position, or Philip Gustafson, who's played well in the playoffs. Like those guys might be better suited for playoff hockey, even though they don't have a Vezina trophy and you don't have to pay them as much. So anyways, we won't go in circles about goaltending because we probably could. But the one player I want to ask you about is just Brady Tkachuk, because you're a national reporter, and it feels like last year Brady Tkachuk really cemented himself as like a star in the NHL. And I'm curious for you, how impressed were you by the way he played at Four Nations in the playoffs, and how much do you think that's going to translate into the season?
Yeah, he really, I mean, him and Matthew became sort of the Kelsey brothers of hockey, right? Like, and obviously that's an easy connection to make, but they sort of like, they really entered the spotlight and then just said, give us more attention. Like, and not in a bad way, like more in like a, like we're part of it is that like, I feel like they understand the sort of sell the game thing, which a lot of players don't. And some of this traces back to Keith Tkachuk and growing up around hockey rinks and around media and around fans, and it comes natural to them, and they have this playing style that's just tantalizing. But yeah, he's really like a fascinating player as far as his impact on the game, because even to go back to when I was in Ottawa, it was right before the playoffs, so he hadn't played a playoff game, but he had played at Four Nations. And I was just sort of chatting around the room with players, Pinto or Batherson or Shabbat, in terms of like, okay, from the outside, we're all fired up to see what Brady Tkachuk will look like in the playoffs. But I mean, what's it like in this room? Like, you saw him at Four Nations, and they just sort of like, they lit up at that point in terms of like, this guy is an emotional leader in the regular season. We expect something pretty special out of him in the playoffs. And, just sort of like, the Four Nations face-off was playoff hockey, if we're being completely honest. Like the level of intensity,
it was way better.
Hockey. Yeah, it was arguably the best hockey of the year. So to see him on that stage and really relish it, he just seems like a guy who's unflappable in a lot of ways. And also, one thing I was asking those players about in terms of like, so what does it mean to be an emotional leader? Like, is that literally like vocal in the room? And they said yes, to some extent, Brady's like that, but he's more like, if it's a Tuesday in Columbus, like he, a couple of shenanigans after the whistle, he, kind of wakes up the bench. It's like almost like he, that classic, like drags people into the fight. Like it's literally the fight. Like he's, and I don't know. It's one of those things where it's kind of hard to wrap your head around or wrap your arms around from the outside. Like obviously I played sports growing up, but I haven't played at that level. Like, what does that mean? Like, these guys are professionals. It should be easy to get up for games, or to even get, into games, but like everyone's human. So you need that emotional leader. So I think naming him captain was kind of a no-brainer. He's taken that and ran with it. And then as a player, I think everyone, and who knows, maybe it will never come, but I think everyone's still waiting for the big point total. Like, he's obviously produced for a while here, a handful of seasons, but like has he tapped out in terms of the sort of the goal total, the assist total, or is this the season he breaks out? Because it's one thing to be, and not to go down a rabbit hole of like expected goals models, but like some of the reason why he ranks so highly in those models is because he's jamming pucks against the the goalie's pads versus like doing something super skilled around the net. So I think he brings a ton of value on and off the ice. But the one thing that's still sort of like lingering is, okay, yes, he's going to be playing with Stützle, but like, is Stützle dominating the sort of offensive output there, or is it a 1A 1B where they really play off each other and it becomes a very symbiotic relationship in terms of like Stützle puts up 90 and Tkachuk puts up 85? You know what I mean? Like, or is that just unrealistic? I don't know, but that's what's still.
No, it's something that I was talking to Graham Nichols just at the rink recently, and I think he spoke to Brady about it. But the fact that he's become a much better shooter, even though he loves to bang. Like the goal that he scored in the play, I forget if it was game 3 or game 4, where he just launched it from like just inside the blue line against Stolars, tied the game, went to overtime. Yeah, it was game 3, and I was just thinking, like, if he got a bit more puck luck, like just if his shooting percentage just went up a tick, I think he's a 40. He can be a 40 and maybe even 50 just because of how, like almost like the Zach Hyman a couple of years ago, where everything around him was going in. And I think the thing that we haven't really talked about, just I think in like Sens media, is that last year in preseason he gets hurt. Then in Four Nations he gets hurt. Basically doesn't play the rest of the season. Like his numbers were definitely affected by being banged up, and they're all banged up to a certain degree. But he had 35, 37 a couple years ago. I think this team's much better and is in a much better position, especially on the power play, for him to produce. So I think like for going into this season, he should be thinking 40 goals. Like he would never say this, but 40 goals should be a target for him. That, okay, if I need to get my game up to that level where I'm scoring 40 goals a year, because that's going to help my team and obviously good for him. And I think if you look at the analytics, when he's away from Stützle, he's still really good. When Stützle's away from him, he's still good, but not as good as Brady. And that's one interesting thing that I think people like that aren't in Ottawa all the time it's hard to watch. I don't watch Carolina enough. Like I don't know what Jesperi Kotkaniemi's up to these days other than playing for the Hurricanes. But I think he drives a lot of play more than people think. And I think as he gets older, more mature, how is that going to translate? I don't know. But he has also taken a bit more defensive pride. So I think that's kind of scaled him back at the same time. So, but I think 40 goals should be the criteria for a good season for Brady Tkachuk.
That's fair. And one thing I will say about Tkachuk, and this applies to his brother too, is these guys are very unique players in a sense that like they are incredibly smart, and that's around the net, in the corner, chirping wise, like they have this like innate sense around the rink of what to do and what not to do. And the stuff that like Brady, okay, he's improved a shot. Like there's certain things that are like more easy to improve upon. And a shot is one of them. Skating is too. Like we've seen over the years, guys who just show up and they're better skaters than they went to town, but like smarts, you can improve it. But like, I feel like it's one, more difficult. And two, I feel like the baseline is sort of like hardwired. So like the Tkachuks are right there in terms of like their baseline is so high. So that it's like, okay, if I can tweak my speed by my quickness by whatever percent in the off season, I mean that's something that can level you up because you have that baseline. And I feel like also what the Tkachuks do that really endears them to not only fan bases but coaches and teammates is they do a lot of the little things right, a lot of the unsexy things, which you don't usually see from like a top line winger or in Matthews' case, like a guy who's put up 100 points, but like wall play, incredibly important. Brady's going to do that better than Tim Stützle. And he's going to feed him as he's like zooming down the middle of the ice. And you need someone to do that consistently Like Stützle, I'm sure loves playing with him in part because Brady does these little things and he doesn't have to worry about it. So yeah,
Yeah.
them being together is such a fun tandem too, in terms of like how different they are, what they bring to the table, creativity versus like a lot of grunt stuff, but also, Brady's got that skill mixed in there. And then obviously Stützle, big storyline around him or narrative around him is cleaning up some of the deficiencies over the years. So they're both they're both in their primes. Like it's going to be really interesting to see what they do.
The one thing, and I'm curious what you think about it, but for me, Stützle needs to score more. Like he needs to shoot more. Like there's so many games you watch him, and he's so tantalizingly talented as a player. Like he'll get into great spots all the time, and he'll try to make the perfect play or not shoot or defer. And it's like it's a little bit like, again, he is not Connor McDavid, but a little bit of the McDavid where sometimes you actually want McDavid to shoot more. Like even though he can set up everyone, he's at his most dangerous when has a bit more of shooter mentality because you have no clue what he's going to do. And I think that for Timmy is what he needs to do more so this season, is like when he had 40 goals or 39 goals, he needs to have more of that in his game, because I think defensively he took a huge leap. Like he's not Kopitar or anyone like that, but he became like a really good defensive player just with his speed and tenacity. If you can just level up the offense and the scoring, I think he can be a 40-goal guy, a 100-point guy quite easily. It's just kind of putting it all together.
Yeah, and I think he's got a really good opportunity here where a lot of his game is one-on-one, and like he's one of the better one-on-one players in the league. So it's like instead of one-on-one dish it to a teammate, it's one-on-one, you beat the guy wide and you're thinking shot. Obviously you need to have some deception in there so you're not predictable, but like he has no problem creating scoring opportunities. It's just he usually defers. And I think you're right, where there's that McDavid effect where like some years McDavid just goes, I'm going to score 50 goals this year. Like I just feel like doing that. And like, Stützle's got to have that mentality of like, maybe it's as simple as like a goal. Like I want to get to 40 goals. And then next thing you know, instead of 2 out of 10 times he shoots instead of passes, it's like 5 out of 10 he shoots instead of passes, right? So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I guess I've kept you on for a long time, so I'll kind of try to wrap this up. But I guess for you, if you had an over under in terms of points that this team will get this year, would 95? Would you take the over or under?
I guess if I'm putting them third in the Atlantic, over by.
I almost said 100, but I'm like, I don't know if that's. It's like in that high 90s.
Yeah, like 100, I would probably go under, just because 100, that's a lot of points, man. Like it's those extra 2 or 3 wins that I'm not ready to sort of give to them yet. But typically the playoff cut line's around like 93, 95. So I think like I said before, like the Atlantic's going to be a gong show in terms of like all these teams trying to win. And we'll see what happens with Boston, but I'm sure they're going to go in the other direction. But like if all those teams are trying to win, there's going to be fewer teams that have 110 points in that division, right? It's going to kind of come to the middle a little bit. So if you're gun to my head, I would probably, let's just say 98 points for the Senators.
That sounds right. It's interesting because even last year, the Atlantic, like all the teams had cut in their points. Like Toronto, although Toronto kind of went up, but like Florida went down, Tampa went down. Obviously, Boston fell down, right? And Ottawa took a jump, but they didn't have 100 or 105 points, right? I think in the Atlantic this year, it's going to be super competitive. And like the threshold to win the division might be like 104 points. Like I don't think you need to race ahead, because I think everyone's going to be picking points off each other. And it's just, can you get those extra 3 or 4 wins? And I think Ottawa's in a really good position to make the playoffs, to be a good team. I just don't see a lot of holes in their team, right? As we've mentioned. And I think if you look at all the other teams, Florida, I think, is just injuries and fatigue. Tampa Bay is very top heavy, and who knows what Vasilevsky is. Toronto lost Marner. They might be a better playoff team. I'm actually open. I mean, you're the more of the Toronto guy here, but I think in the regular season, losing Marner, I don't think Matisz, Maccelli, and Dakota Joshua, good on them. I think they're going to take a step back in the regular season, and we'll see what happens in that too. So I see this division being ripe for the Senators to win in the regular season. I think in the playoffs, the problem will be the creme de la creme talent comes out, and I just can't see them beating Florida. I can see them beating any other team in the division in the playoffs. I can't see them beating Florida, and that's kind of why I'm higher on them as a regular season team and a bit lower on them as a playoff team, if that makes any sense.
That's a pretty bold prediction, putting them first in the Atlantic. Like,
well, I put it on for Sportsnet, so
did you, yeah?
David Amber joined me, so I feel
okay. You got one supporter. I don't think it's like the craziest take. It's not like putting the Sabres at first or something, or even Montreal. Like I'm super like exceptionally high on Montreal long term. But I feel like some of last season was like a bit of not fake, but like a bit of like percentages and all that. I still think that they'll probably make the playoffs, but I think that it's more realistic to expect Ottawa to sort of move up the ranks. Hence why I have them third above Florida, who's starting the year injured. So, but yeah, like you could argue this is the deepest division in hockey, and the Metro is probably the least deep, the shallowest. Yeah. Like they have obviously Carolina, no brainer playoff team. Then you got New Jersey. I think the Rangers are going to get back in the playoffs. And then from there, I'm not quite sure
Washington,
what I think of it. Like Washington, like I put in my bold predictions that they're going to miss the playoffs, which is pretty bold because they won. They had the most points in the East last year, and I don't feel great about it. I wouldn't bet on it personally.
Well, New York won the East last year,
that's true.
2 years ago, and then they missed the playoffs. So, and they have a bit of similarities. Anyways, we won't go too much into it, but like it's almost the teams that outperform. Like they get lucky. Like their power play is awesome. Their goaltending is spectacular, but like they don't generate enough play. And that's the thing. I think in Ottawa, like the thing that gives me, not to make everything about Ottawa, like in Toronto or something when everyone thinks about the Leafs, but is that their underlying numbers were pretty good. Like not great at 5-on-5, but they weren't bad. They weren't as bad as they matched out, and they somehow made the playoffs while not scoring at 5-on-5. I think they'll be decent. I think maybe they won't score as many power play goals, but I think they'll score more. I think their defense should be better. Honestly, I think they're more primed to be an even better and more defensively stout team. So I can just see them incrementally winning 4 or 5 more games. And then I see the rest of the division. I'm like, I don't see any team outside of Montreal getting better. So that's kind of my thought process on it. It's not because I think Ottawa is going to win the cup and is that good or is like at that level. But I just see the division. I'm like, I don't think Tampa's better. I don't think Toronto's better. Florida is Florida. And then Montreal could get better, but they got much more luckier last year. Like if you look at any analytic, they shouldn't even sniff the playoffs. That wasn't the case for Ottawa. So I think Montreal will be better, but they might regress a little bit. So it'll be a fun season. I think the Atlantic is probably going to be the most like just up and down volatile. And there's always fisticuffs between Ottawa, Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa. So I think it'll be a fun season.
Florida and Tampa, they don't like each other either.
Oh no, they do not. They do not. Scott Sabrin,
Sens
legend.
Yeah,
exactly. John, before I let you go, and again, thanks so much for taking the time. Is there anything at the Score, like you have podcasts, you have so much writing? Is there anything you want to plug before I let you go?
Actually, yeah. So, well, first of all, I guess follow me on Twitter to get all my stories. It's Matisz John. My last name, first name, no space. That's the best way to follow my work moving forward. And I guess most Sens related thing I'll produce anytime soon is I'm going to do sort of like what we learned from the first 3 days of NHL action, which we'll publish on Friday, and I'll have something on there about the Sens. So yeah, appreciate you having me on, Alex, and awesome. great to go back and forth here.
Thanks so much for doing this, and I hope that I see you in April and May, maybe for a Sens Leafs rematch. That'd be something. Yes. So, thanks so much, John, for taking the time and doing this. Check out all of John's stuff at the Score, and thanks again.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Sens Spotlight on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.